The courtroom was packed with corrupt white cops, laughing as they think they've beaten the system once again. But their celebration turns to sheer panic when they discover the black man in the room isn't just another defendant. He's their new boss. Racism, power, and karma collide in this explosive moment of justice. What happens next will redefine everything you thought about the system. This is the twist you have to see to believe. Don't miss the moment that changes everything. Detective Sergeant Mike Donovan and Officer Ryan Sullivan, the untouchable duo of the 34th Precinct, now in handcuffs, being paraded through the same hallways where they once strutted like kings. Their faces drain of color as the cold metal bites into their wrists. The whispers follow them like ghosts. Former allies turn away, suddenly fascinated by paperwork or the floor tiles. No one meets their eyes. These men who once commanded fear and respect are now radioactive. From his office window above the bullpen, Captain Marcus Chambers watches, his dark eyes revealing nothing. His perfectly tailored suit and ramrod posture stand in stark contrast to the disheveled appearance of the disgraced officers below. He doesn't smile. He doesn't need to. But how did we get here? Let me take you back 3 months earlier to where it all began. The courtroom of Judge Harriet Green. Case number 47291. Excessive force complaint against Officers Donovan and Sullivan. The fourth this year alone. Donovan sits with practiced casualness, his silver-streaked hair perfectly combed, blue eyes radiating manufactured sincerity. Beside him, Sullivan bounces his knee under the table, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. They've been here before. They know how this ends. Judge Green clears her throat, never quite looking at the young black man sitting at the plaintiff's table. Terrell Jackson, 23 years old, engineering student. His left arm still doesn't extend fully, the scars from the handcuffs visible even from across the room. Due to insufficient evidence and contradicting witness statements, the court dismisses all charges against the officers. Judge Green announces, her gavel striking with finality. Terrell's shoulders slump forward. His mother, sitting in the front row, covers her mouth to stifle a sob. The sound echoes through the courtroom like an accusation. Under the table, Sullivan extends his fist. Donovan bumps it with his own. Another one bites the dust. Sullivan whispers, not even bothering to lower his voice. Back to patrol. I'm thinking we hit up Martinez's corner today. He's behind on his payments. What the officers don't notice, what they never notice, is the distinguished black man in the back row. Impeccable charcoal suit, silver tie clip, taking notes in a small leather-bound notebook. Marcus Chambers doesn't fidget, doesn't react, just observes with the patience of a predator who has all the time in the world. Back at the precinct, Donovan and Sullivan are heroes among a certain crowd. They swagger through the bullpen, accepting back slaps and congratulations. Their desks overflow with gifts from local business owners. Protection money disguised as gratitude. This is their kingdom, the South District of the 34th Precinct, where they run their own little fiefdom, where witnesses suddenly change their stories, where evidence mysteriously disappears, where complaints get buried in paperwork so deep they might as well not exist. Drinks at O'Malley's tonight. Donovan announces to the group of 6 officers whose loyalty he's bought with promotions and overtime. First rounds on me. They don't know their empire is built on sand. They can't feel it shifting beneath their feet. 3 weeks later, Captain Jim Reeves calls an unexpected meeting. His face is pale, hands slightly trembling as he adjusts his tie. Effective immediately, I'll be taking early retirement, he announces to the shocked room. No warning, no transition plan. The rumor mill explodes. Health problems? Internal affairs investigation? Budget cuts forcing senior officers out? For 2 days, the precinct exists in limbo. Donovan and Sullivan walk around like nothing's changed, but unease follows them like a shadow. Their kingdom needs a ruler, someone they can control. Then comes the morning when everything changes. The precinct falls silent as the commissioner herself walks in, flanked by 2 internal affairs officers and a man Donovan recognizes immediately. The man from the courtroom, the one who was watching. Meet your new captain, the commissioner announces, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. Marcus Chambers, former FBI, Department of Justice prosecutor. He's here with a mandate for change. Donovan's coffee mug slips from his fingers, shattering against the floor. Sullivan's face goes slack with shock. Captain Chambers surveys the room, his gaze finally landing on Donovan and Sullivan. His expression doesn't change, but something cold and knowing passes between them. "Some of you know me from the courtroom," he says, his deep voice carrying without effort. "Others will come to know me very soon." And just like that, the hunters become the hunted. By noon on Captain Chambers' first day, the precinct feels different. Like someone cranked up the thermostat and tightened all the screws. Officers sit straighter. Reports get filed faster. The typical banter dies down to nervous whispers. Donovan leans against the wall, arms crossed, watching Chambers through narrowed eyes. He's seen captains come and go. They all have their crusades at first. "He'll be gone in 6 months," Donovan mutters to Sullivan. "They always are. Remember Captain Rodriguez? All that talk about cleaning up the streets, and now she's pushing papers in traffic division." Sullivan nods, but his eyes dart nervously toward Chambers' office. "Something's different about this one, Mike. The way he looks at us. Like he knows." Donovan scoffs. "Knows what? Our arrest record is perfect. Our paperwork is clean. We're untouchable." The words barely leave his mouth when Officer Chen approaches, looking uncomfortable. "Captain wants to see you both. Now." In Chambers' office, the new captain doesn't invite them to sit. Doesn't look up from his paperwork for a full 30 seconds. When he finally speaks, his voice is calm but carries the weight of authority. "I've been reviewing personnel assignments," he says, sliding 2 folders across his desk. "You're both being reassigned. Effective immediately." Donovan doesn't reach for the folder. "With all due respect, sir, we've worked this district for 15 years. No one knows these streets better than us." Chambers finally looks up, his expression unreadable. "That's precisely the problem, detective. You've been here too long. Made too many connections." By afternoon, their desks are relocated to the basement archive room. Their case files reassigned. Their confidential informants transferred to other officers. Sullivan slams his fist against the dusty metal desk. "This is bullshit. He can't just bury us down here." But he can. And he does. Their first attempt to push back comes the following week. A drug bust they'd set up months ago. One that would have netted them thousands in skimmed cash. They show up at the location, only to find it's already been raided. By officers from another precinct. Captain's orders. Their replacement tells them, not quite hiding his satisfaction. "Cross-precinct task force. Your intel, our execution." Days turn into weeks. Chambers' offensive continues like a chess master claiming pieces one by one. Bank records are subpoenaed. Suddenly, there are questions about Donovan's lake house. Sullivan's new car. Deposits that don't match their salaries. Their network of protection begins to crumble. The bartender at O'Malley's suddenly can't hold their usual table. The clerk at the evidence room starts logging everything electronically. "New protocol," she claims. Their reliable witnesses suddenly develop conscience or memory problems or both. Even their loyal officers begin to distance themselves. First, it's just canceled drinks after work. Then it's changing directions in the hallway. Finally, it's outright avoidance. "He's turning them against us," Sullivan whispers, the dark circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. "How's he doing it?" Donovan's knuckles turn white around his coffee mug. Someone's feeding him information. Someone on the inside. The real blow comes when they discover the truth about Terrell Jackson. The revelation hits like a physical punch to the gut. "Chambers' nephew," Donovan hisses, throwing the file onto the desk. "The kid was working undercover the whole time, gathering evidence, recording conversations, and we walked right into it." Sullivan's face turns ashen. "That means everything we said to him, everything we did, is on record," Donovan finishes. Desperation drives them to their most dangerous gambit yet. Judge Green has been their ace in the hole for years, blackmailed into compliance after they discovered her son's drug problem. One final visit to call in all markers. But when they stride into her chambers, files in hand, threats ready on their lips, they find her looking calm. Too calm. And sitting across from her desk, Captain Marcus Chambers. "Gentlemen," Chambers says, a recording device on the table between them. "I've been expecting you." As internal affairs officers emerge from the adjoining room, the reality crashes down. Every piece of evidence they'd buried, every witness they'd threatened, every dollar they'd stolen, all meticulously documented. As the handcuffs click around their wrists, Sullivan's panicked eyes meet Donovan's. "This isn't over," he whispers frantically. "We still have the files on Commissioner Davis." But even as they're led away, something darker looms. In his office, Captain Chambers opens his desk drawer to find a single black rose. The card beside it reads simply, "Welcome to the real game. If you're watching this, make sure to like and subscribe to see how this power struggle unfolds. The real war is just beginning." Because what Chambers doesn't yet realize is how far up the corruption goes, or how dangerous his crusade will become. The 34th Precinct is just the tip of the iceberg. 3 weeks after Donovan and Sullivan's arrest, Captain Chambers sits alone in his office, staring at the phone. The third threatening call this week. This time, they mentioned his daughter by name, her college, her apartment number. His hand trembles slightly as he sets down his coffee mug. The precinct around him has grown eerily quiet. Officers who had begun to warm to his leadership now avoid his gaze again. Something has shifted. That morning, the mayor himself had called, his voice dripping with false concern. "Captain, perhaps you're pushing too hard, too fast. These investigations are disrupting the entire department. Maybe we should take a step back, evaluate the situation." Translation: back off or else. On his desk sits a formal complaint. Evidence tampering. 3 officers, all loyal to the old guard, claim they witnessed Chambers planting evidence in Donovan's locker. The internal affairs investigation is scheduled to begin tomorrow. Outside his window, rain pelts against the glass. The same storm that's been brewing for days, finally breaking open, like the pressure building around him. Chambers opens his drawer, looks at the resignation letter he drafted last night. One signature and this all goes away. His family stays safe. His career intact if diminished. The path of least resistance. His phone buzzes. A text from his nephew Terrell. "You okay, Uncle M? Haven't heard from you." Chambers closes his eyes, remembering his nephew's bruised face after Donovan and Sullivan questioned him. The way Terrell had insisted on continuing the undercover operation despite the risks. "Someone has to stand up to them," he'd said. A knock on his door. Deputy Commissioner Wilson enters without waiting for a response. Her face is grim. "Marcus, we need to talk. This has gone far enough." The mayor is concerned. The department is concerned. She places a folder on his desk. "Sign off on this. Reduce charges for Donovan and Sullivan. Administrative leave. Early retirement. This ends today." Chambers looks at the folder but doesn't touch it. "And if I don't?" Wilson's expression hardens. "Then the evidence tampering investigation proceeds. Your career ends. And for what? 2 bad cops? Is it really worth it?" Something in her tone, the slight tremor of nervousness, makes Chambers pause. She's not just delivering a message. She's afraid. "What are you really worried about, Helen?" he asks quietly. "What is everyone so desperate to keep buried?" The sudden flash of panic in her eyes tells him everything. Chambers stands slowly, reaches for his jacket. "I think it's time you saw something. What happens next changes everything." In a nondescript federal building across town, Chambers leads Wilson into a room filled with monitors, files, and federal agents. 5 years of evidence. Hundreds of hours of recordings. A wall of photos connecting Donovan and Sullivan to a sprawling network that reaches into City Hall, the DA's office, and yes, the Commissioner's office. "This isn't about 2 corrupt cops," Chambers says, his voice steady as Wilson stares in shock at the evidence board. "It never was." He gestures to a federal agent who steps forward. "Deputy Commissioner Wilson, I'm Special Agent Ramirez with the FBI Public Corruption Task Force. Captain Chambers has been our inside man for the past 5 years. Wilson sinks into a chair, her face ashen. The commissioner? Under investigation for the past 3 years, Chambers confirms. Donovan and Sullivan were just foot soldiers. This goes all the way to the top. Back at the precinct later that night, Chambers finds 3 officers waiting in his office. Officer Chen, Detective Rodriguez, Sergeant Peters, all looking nervous but determined. "We have something you should see, Captain," Chen says, sliding a flash drive across the desk. "We've been collecting evidence too, against Donovan and Sullivan at first. But then we started noticing patterns. Money flowing through the Commissioner's charitable foundation, matching deposits after major drug busts. We didn't know who to trust," Rodriguez adds. "Until now, the pieces click into place. Unexpected allies, internal evidence he never knew existed. The final links in the chain he's been building for years." Chambers makes his decision, not just about his career anymore, about justice, about change that matters. The next morning, the commissioner walks into an emergency meeting at City Hall, flanked by the mayor and several council members. Their confident smiles fade when they see Chambers sitting at the table, surrounded by federal agents. "What's the meaning of this?" the commissioner demands, but his voice wavers as he sees the files on the table. Files bearing his name. "This is what justice looks like," Chambers says, rising to his feet. "This is what happens when good people refuse to look away." The commissioner lunges for his phone, but it's too late. News crews are already assembling outside. The warrants have been signed. The raids are happening simultaneously across the city. His face contorts with rage and disbelief. "You're nothing," he spits. "A nobody. You think you can take on the entire system?" Chambers' smile is slight but certain. "Not alone," he says, as federal agents move in with handcuffs. "But I was never alone." The look on the commissioner's face, pure shock giving way to devastating realization, is something Chambers will remember for the rest of his life. This is for every victim who wasn't believed, for every officer who looked the other way, for Terrell, for justice. Keep watching, because the fall of an empire isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet click of handcuffs around the wrists of the powerful who thought themselves untouchable. The headlines dominate every news channel for weeks. Police corruption scandal rocks city. 34 arrests in massive police corruption crackdown. Commissioner among those charged in federal probe. The takedown is breathtaking in its scope, like pulling a single thread that unravels an entire tapestry of corruption. 27 officers. For judges, 3 prosecutors, 6 city officials, and 1 police commissioner. Outside the federal courthouse, reporters swarm as the handcuffed officials are led inside. Their faces, once proud and untouchable, now show the strain of sleepless nights and shattered delusions. Captain Chambers stands to the side, away from the cameras. This isn't about him. It never was. "Captain Chambers," reporters call out. "How does it feel to bring down the largest police corruption case in the city's history?" He simply shakes his head. "Ask the victims how it feels. Ask the communities who lived under this for decades. This isn't a victory. It's long overdue justice." Inside the courthouse, Judge Harriet Green sits in a small conference room, her testimony stretching into its 3rd hour. Her voice shakes, but grows stronger with each revelation. How Donovan and Sullivan blackmailed her using her son's addiction. How the commissioner protected them. How the mayor looked the other way. "I was a coward," she admits, tears streaming down her face. "I compromised everything I believed in because I was afraid." But now her testimony helps build an airtight case. Her cooperation will mean a reduced sentence, but more importantly, it means a chance at redemption. Across town, Terrell Jackson sits with his mother in Captain Chambers' office, reviewing the final settlement offer from the city. "It's not enough," Chambers says, his disgust evident. "No amount would be enough for what they did to you." Terrell looks at the figure, 7 digits long, then places the paper down. "It was never about money," he says quietly. "It was about making sure they couldn't do this to anyone else." His mother reaches over, taking his hand. The scars on his wrist are still visible, but fading, like a badge of courage now rather than shame. "When you asked me to go undercover, I was terrified," Terrell tells his uncle. "But now, I think maybe this is what I was meant to do." In the months that follow, the trials become a public reckoning. Donovan and Sullivan, once swaggering with confidence, now sit diminished in prison jumpsuits. As the evidence mounts, hidden camera footage, financial records, testimony from those they'd victimized, their strategy shifts from defiance to desperation. Former allies scramble to cut deals, each revelation more damning than the last. The commissioner, once the second most powerful man in the city, watches his empire crumble brick by brick. On the day of sentencing, Donovan finally speaks, his voice barely audible in the hushed courtroom. "I never saw them as people," he confesses, not looking at the victims seated in the gallery. "Just obstacles, problems to solve." It's not quite remorse, but it's the closest thing to truth he's ever offered. The judge is unmoved. 25 years, she pronounces, with no possibility of parole. As Sullivan receives the same sentence, his final glare at Chambers carries all the hatred he can muster. But Chambers doesn't flinch. Hatred from men like this is a badge of honor. 1 year later, Captain Chambers, now Chief Chambers, walks through the transformed 34th Precinct. New faces, new policies, new hope. The Community Oversight Board he established meets weekly in what was once the commissioner's private conference room. Civilian complaints are investigated transparently. Body cameras are mandatory and reviewed regularly. In the community center across from the precinct, Terrell Jackson leads a youth program that creates dialogue between teens and officers. His law school applications sit completed on his desk at home. His focus, civil rights law. "The kids were terrified of police when we started," Terrell tells his uncle as they watch a basketball game between local teens and rookie officers. "Now look at them. The change isn't perfect. There are still difficulties, still resistance. But it's real change, measurable, meaningful." That evening, Chief Chambers sits in his office, looking at the framed news article on his wall. The same black rose that once threatened him now preserved under glass. A reminder. His phone rings. A federal prosecutor with news. The final appeal from Donovan and Sullivan has been denied. Their sentences stand. Justice served. But at what cost? Chambers looks at the photo on his desk. His daughter's graduation, delayed a year after she had to transfer schools following the threats. The strain of that year etched in all their faces. Would he do it all again? In a heartbeat. Because here's what no one tells you about fighting corruption. The system doesn't just protect the corrupt. It punishes those who challenge it. Standing up means being knocked down repeatedly. It means putting targets on the backs of everyone you love. But there's no other way. No shortcut to justice. No easy path to change. And that's what Chambers tells the new recruits at their swearing-in ceremony the next morning. 28 officers. Diverse. Idealistic. The future. The badge isn't power, he tells them. It's responsibility. It's service. And sometimes, it's sacrifice. As they raise their hands to take the oath, he sees in their eyes what he's been fighting for all along. Not just punishing the corrupt, but creating space for something better to grow in its place. If you're still with me after this journey, take a moment to reflect. What would you risk to stand up for what's right? What systems around you need someone brave enough to challenge them? Later that afternoon, Chambers walks back through the same hallway where, a year earlier, Donovan and Sullivan were led away in handcuffs. The same officers line the walls, but everything else has changed. This time, there's no silence, no shame, no averted gazes. This time, there's respect, purpose, and something that had been missing for too long in the 34th Precinct. Pride. Real pride. The kind that comes not from power, but from service. Not from fear, but from trust. Not from corruption, but from justice. And in that moment, all the sacrifice feels worth it.